Okay, everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for carving some time out of your day, wherever you may be. By way of quick introduction, my name is Steve Tracy. I'm the Director of Training and Technical Services here at JL Audio. Today on the line, we also have Kevin Ferry, who's located up near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Say hi, Kevin.
What's happening, everybody?
And way out west in Southern California, we have Mr. Rob Haynes that's going to be joining us today and leading our presentation. Say hi, Rob.
Hi, Rob.
Today's session is a marine products overview. And so without further ado, Rob, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to you and let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Steve. All right. So as Steve said, today's agenda, we're going to discuss, it's an overview of the marine audio lineup for JL Audio. We're not going to really get super deep into individual SKUs or the categories themselves. I kind of like to look at this as when do you want to sell an M6 over an M3? When do you want to add amplifiers to a system, and what's the right amplifier to add? What's the right source unit? Is it a MM100 SBE or maybe an MBT CRX V2? So that's kind of what the overview of the product session is going to be. We are going to start, though, with a little bit of a conversation about what makes a JL Audio marine product a JL Audio marine product. And then, of course, any questions that come up, there is the chat window. Steve and Kevin will be answering questions throughout the training. And then at the end, once I close out the keynote, any other questions that come up, we can unmute microphones then and have whatever conversations that we need to have. So with that said, for me, I feel one of the big aspects to our success in the marine audio market at JL Audio is we're a company of marine enthusiasts. We live on the water. We understand what it takes for a product to survive on the water. And, those real life experiences, understanding the environment, the demands, whether it's the weatherproof, moisture, sound obstacles, all of those experiences are a key element to our design process. That's the initial design philosophies are all being designed around this marine environment. It's not just taking an existing car speaker and marinizing it. It's understanding that out in the wild, if you will, when you're on the boat with the waves, the motor, the wind, you're going to have high frequency and upper mid-range cancellation. If you listen to our marine speakers on a solo display or in a store, they may sound a little aggressive and in your face, and that's on purpose because we know that aggressiveness is going to get canceled out in the environment they're supposed to be in, and you're going to have a nice tonally balanced speaker. So this kind of stuff, when it comes to designing our products, it's all from our experiences on the water. And obviously not just the sounding good part, but it's got to last as well. And that's where we go through the extensive environmental testing in Florida and all of that other stuff. And of course, we have a fantastic marine, our tech support team, fantastic support. They're all NEMA 2000 certified. They understand the marine environment and can further provide support for system design. Any questions like that? I see Steve's laughing. Kevin and Steve are NEMA 2000 certified as well. So, we are a company that lives and breathes marine audio, and I think it shows in all of our products. So as I mentioned, as I'm sure most of you know, all of our speakers are designed in South Florida. That's where Lucio and our loudspeaker engineering team design all of our speakers from, an entry-level C1 on the car side to the big W7s, found in our Gotham and the home systems, as well as all of our marine products as well. And that's where we do all of the voicing testing, all of the other aspects of speaker design. But most importantly, on the marine side, we have what's called the lab in our engineering department. Yip here is one of our main engineers who's responsible for our extensive amounts of environmental testing. And the environmental testing just isn't during the initial design process. It actually is for the lifetime of the speaker. The M series speakers, before they were replaced by M6, they were almost 14 years old, and they still went through the same environmental testing they did during their initial development. Because it's not just about, once the speaker's done, it's done. It's can we improve it? There's new materials that are constantly coming out. Will that yield better results in terms of reliability in the environment? But it's also for warranty. When a marine product specifically comes back, if it fails in the field, after warranty signs it in, they give it to engineering. And engineering is going to try to replicate the environment and try to stop that failure from potentially happening again. So it's not just for development, but it's a constant cycle of maintaining the quality of the product once it's in the field. So we've invested heavily in quite a few environmental machines. Yip here is standing in front of the Q-Fog machine, and this is a really cool machine. It can simulate all sorts of moisture exposure, fresh water, various saltwater combinations, mist, fog, heavy spray. If it's some type of moisture a speaker could be exposed to in the wild, we can simulate it in this machine. And these machines can simulate weeks, if not months of exposure time in a matter of days. So it's really cool how these machines allow us to do this testing. But we don't just test the whole speaker. If you look closely in the image there on the part of the chamber that's open, you'll actually notice individual components in there. As I said, it's not just about the whole speaker, but as materials change, as new stuff becomes available, all of that is tested throughout the lifespan of the speaker. Another key machine for us is the QUV machine, and this is what we do to test UV exposure. I was shocked when I moved to Florida when I first started with JL Audio at how crazy the UV, the ultraviolet light from the sun is there. You know, in California, everyone says the smog here is horrible. Well, it protected my skin from getting burned. I went to Florida where there's no smog and the UV was burning my skin in 30 seconds. I had like second-degree burns and had to put suntan lotion on. So we understand an environment like Florida, it's intense. And our engineering team, they try to aim, you know, I think we set our goal in Florida is a minimum of 7 years of crazy, ultra-intense UV exposure before you may start to see any fading of the materials or any potential defects due to UV exposure. 7 years is a long time in that type of environment. And in most other places throughout the country and the world, that's a lifetime for the speaker because you don't have that crazy intensity. So the UV machine is very important. Yip loves it as well too. He was able to cancel his membership to the tanning salon. He just stands in front of that and he gets a nice tan every single day. So with the Thermotron, we can actually do rapid temperature swings. And that's really important in the marine environment. We can go from a ridiculously high temperature and at a very rapid rate, swing down to a rapidly cold temperature. And these sudden changes are important in the marine environment, especially if you're in a colder climate. It might be warm and hot in the summer in Minnesota, for example. It's 100 degrees, the sun's baking on the speaker, but that water's still cold from that frozen winter. And when you have that cold water splash on that hot speaker, that sudden change can lead to molecules expanding, contracting. It can make plastic-based materials brittle. So this type of testing with temperature swings allows us to ensure that's not going to happen in the wild. We can bake the speakers. Yes?
I would have used Minnesota for an example of a hot climate.
Well, it gets hot and muggy in this. It gets hot and muggy in the summer there, and it's cold as heck in the winter. So.
Yeah, but they're not exactly known for their summers.
Hey, I've been in Minnesota in June. It's not comfortable. All right. But with this machine, we can do rapid testing. We can do extreme high heat testing. We can do extreme low temperature testing and make sure that the materials are going to last in those extreme environments. So this type of stuff happens because we understand the environment, that you cannot just take a car speaker, put some, weatherproof materials on it and call it a day. These are purpose-built speakers because we know as a company that application matters, especially when you're dealing with marine and power sports environments.
And the nice thing is that with all of these testings that we do in-house, we also do a lot of real-world testing too, like Rob said. And when we go and get our IP ratings and all of that, we actually send those out to special laboratories to do those types of testings to get those IP ratings for electronics and stuff like that.
And the beautiful thing about our equipment is we already do those tests ourselves. So when we send them to those companies for certification, we know they're going to pass because we've already run those tests on our own machines. So that's a very big benefit of having those as well. So we're going to jump into the marine product category now. We're going to start with speakers and the M6 line. This replaced the M series, and it's our premium flagship line. And all M6 speakers use what we call a long excursion woofer design. And this is very important. It's why the speakers are so darn big. They're deep, but there's a reason for that. A long excursion woofer design, it allows us to maximize the output potential because we're not compromising the ability for the speaker to move. Having a big motor, having a big suspension assembly on a speaker really allows us in this demanding environment to help overcome those obstacles. So we're not cranking the radio up and clipping the amplifier and then damaging speakers on top of having poor sound quality. So this ensures this type of design, we can get everything out of an M6 speaker. A while ago, I was traveling throughout the field and I saw an 8.8-inch speaker on a desk, and it was not ours. It had the 8.8-inch cone, but the bottom end, the basket, the motor, the suspension, it looked like a 6.5-inch driver. It looked like an M6 650. And yeah, I'm sure that speaker probably played really, it was loud in the mid-range and the upper frequencies, but on the bottom end, it has nowhere near the amount of movement that an M6 880 would. There's no way it would have that low frequency performance like a larger coaxial can. Steve and I were doing an event a year or so ago, and I had someone ask me from another company, "Oh, is that one of your marine subwoofers?" I said, "No, that's a coaxial." He says, "Why is it so darn big?" I said, "So it plays loud." That's why. So that's a key element to the M6 design. Additionally, we have the multiple size options for M6. We have the 6.5, you have a 7.7, and the 8.8-inch coaxials. And this is a great option to get louder, especially if running multiple amplifiers or high power amplifiers is not an option. The M6 770 is going to have 48%, almost a 50% increase in cone area over the 6.5-inch counterpart. Likewise, our 8.8-inch M6 speakers have 34% more cone area than the 7.7, but where you're really going to see the difference is when you compare that 8.8-inch to the 6.5-inch, almost double the cone area at 98%. So if we need to get louder, we don't have room for a lot of speakers on a vessel, put those 8.8s in. Output-wise, we're going to get almost 3 dB of more output just by adding an 8.8 instead of a 6.6. And with that long woofer excursion design, we're going to get all that low frequency response. It's not just overall loudness, but we're going to get a lot better bottom end as well. So really nice flexibility with the M6 if you don't have a lot of room for speakers in the vessel. Additionally, we use a tiered tweeter size on each of the models, anywhere from 0.8 up to 1.25 inch on the 8.8-inch coaxials. Being that the different size cones are going to yield different upper mid-range results, having a tiered different size tweeter with its own individual crossover network helps ensure we have a smoother handoff, if you will, between the tweeter and the cone of the mid-range in that key high frequency mid-range area. So all the M6 products have their own dedicated crossover network. The crossover on a 6.5 inch is going to be different than the crossover network found in the 8.8 inch. So again, that's all to ensure we have a nice, smooth overall sound. Additionally, on M6, we do use treated silk dome tweeters. I love silk. For me, that's my go-to. I find them to be very neutral and natural sounding. They're not as fatiguing on the ears as metal dome tweeters may be after extended listening, but most importantly, especially in the marine environment, it's a non-corrosive material, so we don't have to worry about tweeters rusting out if they get exposed or if water gets on them or anything like that. So it further helps marinize it, but provide more smoother sound. I think that's important in the marine environment. It's a social environment. It's about fun. It's about cranking the radio up and having a good time. And you definitely don't want speakers on the boat that are going to be hurting your ears, be fatiguing after extended listening. We want it to sound great. And I think silk dome tweeters are a perfect example of that. One of the other cool aspects we have on the new M6 line is this patented tweeter bridge, which is found on the sport grill models. What's nice about this is that it allows you to do a little bit of customization with what we're calling a modular approach. So by being able to remove the trim ring and the grill insert, it allows you to easily paint and customize those grills and trim rings. And it was one of the things we listened to. On the old M product, one of the complaints about the sport grill was if you wanted to paint it or customize it, a lot of these new vessels, you can customize it however you want from the factory. They have all sorts of different color interior options, exterior, whether it's for power sports, motorcycles. If you wanted to paint that grill, you'd have to break the tweeter out of it, paint it, and then reassemble it and hope you reassembled the tweeter and didn't break it. So the nice thing with this new sport grill model is the trim rings, the grill inserts, they just come right off the speaker. The tweeter still stays attached to the core driver, and it's a lot easier for those customization options to sand, primer, paint, and do whatever you want with the grill and the trim ring assembly, which is really cool. So we do have a couple of subwoofer options on the M6 side of things, and we have to make sure that we do choose the correct subwoofer. I'm going to say, don't pull a Rob. And what I mean by that is when I was new to retail and the car audio world, I did not know what the difference between an infinite baffle and a typical subwoofer was. And perfect example, I had a customer come in my shop when I was working for Car Toys up in Seattle, and he says, hey, I have a boat, I want to go fishing tomorrow, and I want a JL audio system put in it today. I said, fantastic, I got it all, let's do it. I sold him an IB subwoofer, and we put it in a box, and it sounded horrible. There was no low frequency response, and it took someone in the store that knew a thing or two to call me an idiot and say, hey, it's not supposed to go in a box. So if you're going to sell an M712IB, the 6 or the 8.8 inch infinite baffle subwoofers, do not put it in a box, please. We're going to cut a hole in the vessel. It's going to mount directly to the fiberglass. And whether it's in the center console or up in the hull or wherever it is in the vessel, we're going to use the airspace within the fiberglass, and that's going to act as the enclosure. IB subwoofers use different suspensions than a sealed enclosure does to compensate for the different amount of air that it's going to see behind it. So just make sure if you're selling an IB, you're going to mount it directly to the vessel itself. If you need an enclosure, that's where the W models come in, the M610W and the M68W. These are available as raw drivers, and you can build your own enclosure, or we have these really awesome fiberglass enclosures that we build, prep, and paint in-house that are available as well, and very compact. One thing I would recommend if you are doing an IB, make sure you have proper bracing for it, especially on that big 35 plus pound M712 IB. If we don't have proper bracing, obviously it could rip out of the fiberglass, it could splinter the gel coat and cause cracks and other issues, especially on the water. Once the boat starts smacking down on the waves, that's a lot of force when you're dealing with rather thin fiberglass. So make sure you have a good starboard brace behind it, and that's what our tech support team recommends.
Hey, Rob.
Yes, Kevin.
We got a good question from Tracy
Okay.
on the chat here. They're curious as why the M712 is an M7 and not an M6. Does that mean there will be a broader M7 line?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not part of the development of that stuff. It's a little out of my wheelhouse, but what I would say is this. When we first had the original 12, we called it an M612. We didn't call it an M series like the older generation product was. And the reason for that was it really was a beast of its own nature. I kind of look at the 12s as the W7s, if you will, on the marine side. So when we transitioned to M6, it made sense to make the new one M7 because it really is in a league of its own. The output of one M712IB is about equivalent to two of the 10-inch models. So this is a big burly beast. It uses a way larger motor assembly. It actually has a larger voice coil than the 13W7 does at almost 4¼ inches. So it's a monster of a beast, and it's designed to be that step up above from the comparable M6 subwoofers. One other thing real quick on the M6 subwoofer side of things, that 8.8 inch, there has been some confusion I've heard in the past. That 8.8 inch sub is a dedicated subwoofer. It shares the same housing or frame, if you will, of the 8.8 inch coaxial, but that's it. It's its own dedicated motor, own dedicated suspension. We didn't just take a coaxial, pull the tweeter out, and call it a subwoofer. The 8.8 is a dedicated sub. It just has the same house as its coaxial counterpart. So just in case you guys didn't know about that. Moving on to some of the other benefits on the M6 side of things is this really cool new patented transflective lighting system we've done. We utilize what we call a transflective cone. And what transflective means is light can shine through it and reflect off the surface. So with this cool cone, and by lining the top of the speaker frame with a ton of heavy-duty RGB LEDs, we get this beautiful effect that literally looks like the cone has been painted. And I remember when I first showed this image during one of my presentations, I had someone say, that's BS, that's Photoshop. There's no way that's real. And this is an undoctored photo that our marketing team took. And finally, I had to start putting images from the Miami Boat Show when the M6 launch happened to show all these boats lit up at night to say, no, this is the real deal. Look at these pictures. And once people got them into their stores and on display, man, everywhere I go, people rave about this lighting design because the benefits of transflective is it's smooth. You don't have hot spots. You don't see the physical LEDs reflecting off the surface of the cone. When it's not in use, it looks like a regular gray cone. You can't tell the difference between an illuminated M6 and a non-illuminated model when the LEDs aren't on. So we've got that full RGB capability, which is nice. You can hardwire them for up to 6 or 7 different colors. And we also have that optional RGB controller, which allows you to control the lights as well. And we'll get more into the M6 and the lighting and the accessories when we do the speaker training a little bit later on. M3. I hate calling this entry level because it's not entry. Yes, it's our entry level product on the marine side, but it is far from an entry level speaker. I think for me, the key aspect of our M3 line is its M6 DNA. It's just scaled back a bit to make it a little more affordable. And if you look at an M3 and an M6 product, material, they all use the same materials. We're not really doing anything that would affect the overall performance. But what we do on M3 is really it's designed to be an efficient speaker. So we have a smaller motor, a little bit of a smaller voice coil so it handles a little less power. Ways that we can make it more affordable without compromising the overall sound quality of the product. These are fantastic solutions if we're not using amplifiers. So in a low power application, maybe we're using the deck power on an MM50 or an MM80HR. These are going to sound great. And they're going to sound even better if we amplify them and add even extra power to them. And I'm always a firm believer in the marine environment. You should always have amps on your vessel because we need that little bit of extra power to overcome some of those obstacles. But maybe it's a small fishing boat, a little boat, and they just troll or coast along the shore fishing for bass. We probably don't need a big amplifier for that. So these would sound great on something like an MM50 or an MM80HR. We do use the same tweeter size on these. Both the 6.5 and the 7.7 M3 coaxials use a 3/4 inch silk dome tweeter. And on the sub side of things, we only have a single infinite baffle option. So just be aware of that. If you need a sealed enclosure, you're going to want to use that M610 or M68 IB or W subwoofer. I'm sorry. The M3 series will be for infinite baffle mounting only. So again, we're going to cut a hole in the vessel and mount that M310 IB directly to it. But a really, really nice lineup. For me, this replaces MX, which is some of the most popular products out there. And I think, I know why. It's performance to price. It's phenomenal. Like I said, I hate calling it entry level, even though it is for us. But it's a great sounding product, and our engineering team, I feel, did a fantastic job to scale it back to the point where it's more affordable, but doesn't sound all that off from what an M6 product would. The other thing to know about M3, we do use a more traditional RGB lighting on the new M3 products. So on the M3 Sport Grill only, M6, you can get the LEDs in Classic and Sport. On Sport for M3, it's like the old MX where we had the blue LEDs that surround the tweeter on the bottom of the Sport Grill. Same thing on the M3s, except now they're full RGB. They're not blue only like the M3 models were. So that's our speaker family. Moving on to source units. Before we get into what each source unit is, I think it's important we understand the questions that we should ask when choosing a source unit for the marine environment. I have found that it's always key to know how many speakers or zones will there be on the boat. Is it a small fishing boat where we're only using 2 speakers? Do we need a subwoofer? Or is it a larger vessel where we're going to have a dedicated bow system, a dedicated cockpit, stern, towers, flybridge?
The question about do we need a sub? Yes.
Yeah, you should always have a sub. So
how many subs do you need?
That's a whole nother training, Kevin. But as many as possible to ensure a nice, even response. Since we're joking about zones and subs real quick, there is an upcoming session on advanced marine system design where we'll actually dive into a zone-by-zone approach to designing marine audio systems. And for me, that's the right way to do it because it yields consistent results no matter where you are within the vessel. But we need to know how complex the system is going to be. What's the source that the end user is going to be using? Are they just using Bluetooth from their phone in a streaming service? Do you need satellite radio? Do you need weather band? And most importantly, how much space do you have? Is this going on a personal watercraft like a jet ski or Sea-Doo or a wave runner? Is it a smaller vessel where, we don't have a lot of room, or is there a glove box it has to go into? So these are some of the things we need to know before we start just throwing source units into our vessels. So the starting at the top, the MMS100BE is our premium source unit. Without a doubt, the right source unit for these complex multi-zone systems. The MM100SBE has 4 zones of output potential via RCA connection, low-level outputs. You can run 4 full-range zones or 3 full-range zones and a subwoofer zone. What's nice about the Media Master units is all of the zones can independently be controlled, both volume and tone control-wise. So we could have relative controls where you can go in and set each zone individually in terms of its output level. And then when you turn master volume up and down, they'll track with that relative difference to the master. We can go in and control each zone independently if we want. So if you want, maybe there's someone up in the bow having a discussion, you can go in and turn down the bow without it affecting the rest of the speakers within the vessel. So a lot of flexibility. And again, you have bass, treble, all of those controls for the zone as well. And when zone 4 is set for subwoofer, it becomes a dedicated subwoofer control, just like as if you would have a bass knob plugged into an amplifier, which will adjust the subwoofer relative where it is with the master volume on the unit. Some other reasons you would want to use the MMS100BE if there's need for weather band out there. Very important if you're going to be in a saltwater environment, especially in more volatile areas where storms can roll in really quick. But even in freshwater, if you're on large lakes like Lake Michigan or Lake Superior, when you get far out there, you're pretty much in the ocean at that point. And even there, even though you're landlocked, out on those larger lakes, weather can be extremely volatile as well. And it's always good to know what's coming in and when you need to start heading back to shore. Sirius XM integration as well with the MMS100BE. You do need to purchase the separate Sirius XM tuner and antenna. I always recommend making sure you get the marine grade one. So again, it'll withstand that rough environment. And our Media Master units are NEMA 2000 compatible with the correct compatible MFD. If I remember correctly, we're good with the vast majority of Simrad, Lowrance, B&G, Garmin, and Raymarine MFDs through the NEMA network, but always verify with the MFD manufacturer. If you're not familiar with an MFD, most of them nowadays on the newer vessels are the big giant touchscreens in the cockpit, but some of them are standalone units as well. They almost look like a GPS. They got the fish finders, all of that stuff. The ones that are integrated into the vessels themselves, that's also where you're going to find like a lot of the new ski boats, where you can change your trim tabs. What's the direction of the wake? Are we surfing or are we wakeboarding? Like all of those different controls, the weight balance, all of that stuff is done through the MFD now. And a lot of the audio is being integrated through that as well through the NEMA 2000 network, which is essentially, the way I look at it, it's a marine version of CAN bus that's standardized across the entire marine platform. Where on the car side, we have CAN bus for Chrysler, CAN bus for Ford. NEMA 2000 is NEMA 2000. If you can integrate into it, your audio is then part of that CAN network and allows the Media Master to be tucked away. And you can control all of the audio from, it depends on the MFD panel, but most of them will not only allow you to do master volume and your source and track up and down, but you can even go in and start adjusting your zones individually if that MFD allows that, which is really freaking cool if you ask me. The MM50, really nice unit. This is actually one of my favorite ones because it's great for those starter entry-level type marine systems. What's cool with the MM50 is we do have onboard power. And I know I said you should always run an amplifier, but not all vessels have the charging system for amplifiers, especially these small little fishing boats. So the MM50 has onboard power. We have a couple of options actually. We have 3 zones of output potential with the MM50. Zones 1 and 2 can either be deck power, or you can do low-level RCA output to amplifiers. And then zone 3 is a dedicated subwoofer zone. So for a more basic system where we're doing 4 speakers and a sub, an MM50 is a great option. And even if you start with just the deck power, you have the low-level outputs to further enhance the system and grow by adding amplifiers down the line. It does have that AM/FM tuner, and again is NEMA 2000 compatible with a compatible MFD, as we discussed. Some things to know with the MM50, you do lose the weather band option and that Sirius XM option. So if you need those, that's where that MM100 SPE is going to be your go-to unit. Additionally, we have a black box unit as well, the MM80HR. This is kind of similar to the MM50, where it's going to be a good unit for a basic multi-zone system, where we have 2 zones of either deck power or 2 zones of low-level output, and then a dedicated subwoofer output as well. This is designed to be used with either an MFD from Lowrance, B&G, or Simrad, or you can use our MMR40 wired remote controller, which is a NEMA 2000 remote control. And this MMR40 also works on the 100 SPE and the MM50, and it's actually a really freaking cool unit. It looks just like an MM50. It essentially is, except all the guts have been, the stereo components have been removed out of it. And being that it's part of the NEMA network, unlike the regular wired remote, where you can have basic master volume, track up and down, change your source, whatever you could do from a media master, you can do from the MMR40, because it's part of that NEMA 2000 network. So changing an independent zone, turning zones on and off, tone controls, searching an iPod or iPhone if that's what's plugged in. All of that can be done from the MMR40. If the vessel itself does not have a NEMA 2000 network for the MMR40 to integrate into, we do sell components that allow you to create your own NEMA 2000 network, so you can use an MMR40 on a vessel that doesn't have NEMA 2000 on it, which is pretty cool. Another nice feature on the MM80HR is that it has a microphone input. This is really nice for a PA system. Whether you're a towboat, that way you can communicate to the riders that's surfing or being towed behind the boat, or even larger boats, you know, captain speaking down to the galley, or party boats where the captain or whoever the entertainer is can speak through the audio system to the other passengers on the vessel. That's a cool feature that's built into the MM80HR.
Real quick,
Yeah.
I want to bring up something that we learned regarding the remotes, like the MMR40. It's a display remote. And I remember when we were doing some of the testing on it, at first we thought we identified some errant behavior, because if you go to the main source unit and you adjust the volume, nothing happened on the remote. And if you change the track, you would hear the change, but you wouldn't see the change on the other unit. That's normal behavior, because usually it's called a remote for a reason. It's nowhere near the other source unit, so why should it change? So just keep that in mind if you're doing any testing on a local network or something. Just realize that the display remote is not going to display changes made from the main source control via the MFD, multifunction display, or the other source unit. So just thought I'd share that with the group in case anyone's ever done that. Hey, how come it's not changing? Because it's remote, you would never see it. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. But maybe a source unit isn't needed. You know, if you're only using an iPhone or an Android phone or some sort of wireless device and streaming through Bluetooth, that's where the MBT-CRX V2 and MBT-RX come in. These are just Bluetooth streaming devices. MBT-CRX V2 is IP67 rated, so whether it's freshwater, saltwater, mist, fog, jet spray, sand, dust, dirt, you name it, this is a weatherproof piece designed for the environment. What I like about the MBT-CRX V2, if you're not familiar with that piece, it's the top piece in the image there. It looks like a little puck with an extension on the back. It has all the controls, so you can hide your wireless device in the vessel. With the phone's put away or your iPod or whatever's put away, less chance of it falling in the water. That's a good thing. As well as being exposed to the sun, the heat, all of those, things electronic devices don't like. So we have volume up and down ability, track up and down, power, and the power for me is an important one on the CRX V2. If you look at the image, you'll see you have your 2 channels of RCA output, you have power, you have ground, but there's also a remote trigger to turn your amplifiers on and off. So when you hit the power button on this MBT-CRX V2 and it turns on, it'll then turn on your amplifiers. When you turn it off, it'll turn off the amplifiers. Now this ensures that the amps aren't on, pulling current from batteries in the charging system when you don't want them to be playing. So for me, that's a nice little extra benefit of the CRX V2 and ensuring, the batteries on the vessel when you're, either at the dock or at the sandbar and you're not running the motor and having the alternator charge the system. If we don't need control, that's where the MMThr comes into play. With the MMThr, you're going to do everything from your phone, from volume to track up and down or whatever controls you need to do. That's going to be all done from your wireless device itself. One thing I always recommend with the MMThr is with the Bluetooth, use the MMThr V2 as your master volume control. Our technical support team recommends on your wireless device to be about 3-4 clicks down from full output, and then use the MMThr V2 as your overall volume control. Some phone devices, when you max out the output through Bluetooth, sometimes it yields poor sounding audio. Stuff either gets overdriven or just doesn't sound that great. So we recommend 3-4 clicks down from full volume, and then use the MMThr V2 as your controller. Likewise on the MMThr, just make sure you don't get 3 to 4 clicks down from full volume, and you should always have fantastic sound.
Hey, a couple of quick things I'd like to share with you, Rob. On the CRX, Rob talked about the remote turn-on lead that goes out to the amplifier, but if you look carefully, you'll notice that there's 2 blue wires. One of them is the turn-on for the MMTCRX itself. So that turns it on. So the system can also then be controlled to turn everything else on. It's a nice gateway. So that'll only come on when the system on the vessel comes on. And then you can then control the amplifier separate from that using the MMTRX. And Rob did a really great job of explaining the benefits of having this Bluetooth connectivity and the benefits of the CRX over, in many ways, the RX. In terms of the actual Bluetooth, it's very similar, if not identical, performance between the two of them. And since we are talking about a boat, I really like the idea of the CRX. If you got room for that hockey puck and any vessel you're dealing with, create your playlist on your phone, throw your phone in a dry area after you pair it up. Everything else is then done from that remote. You never have to touch that phone again. And as Kevin often points out, that if it's in your hand and you're on a boat, it's in the water, either literally or figuratively, because it's going to get exposed to that. And if you tuck that thing in a dry bag and tuck it underneath or store it in a dry storage area, that's a great way for someone to take their music with them on the boat without any worry or concern. So if they're not doing a full-blown system using multi-zones, the CRX is the one that I always go to, even if you're not going to use a lot of the other functionality of it. But that alone, to change the track and control the volume without touching the phone, maybe I'm just prone to that kind of problem, but I think it's a great way of protecting things.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, I see it used all the time. This is where, those personal watercraft, the wave runners, jet skis, Sea-Doos, all of these crazy systems I'm seeing out there, all are using that MMTCRX V2 as the source. Phone's tucked away in a safe dry compartment, and you've got a killer system for when you're out having fun on the water. So
100%.
All right, so let's move on to amplifiers. Real quick though, when do you want to add an amplifier to a system? I know I said all the time. All the time. But again, it's not always feasible. So when do we want to add an amp? Well, we're always going to need an amp when we're using that MMS100BE. Remember, there's no built-in amplifier on the MMS100BE. You're only going to get that built-in power on the MM50 or the MM80HR. So if we're using that 100 SBE, we always need a standalone amplifier. Additionally, if we're using an MM50 or an MM80HR, but we need more output potential, we would want to add an amplifier. Definitely anytime more than 4 speakers. These complex multi-zone systems, anytime we're adding a subwoofer, these are the times when you're going to want to add standalone amplifiers on the boat. And I'm going to say, anytime we add amplifiers to a vessel, especially when we're going to be dealing with a lot of off-power listening time, make sure you analyze and take a look at the charging system and the battery banks, and make sure they're going to be able to handle that extra current draw that amplifiers are going to take, especially when you start to get a little heavy on the listening. We always joke, there's the 3 dB rule. You double or halve your power, you gain or lose 3 dB. And there's another unspoken 3 dB rule that I find in the marine environment, that every beer is a 3 dB increase in output, which again increases current. If we don't have a good battery bank or a robust charging system, could leave you dead in the water. And we don't want that because CTO can be expensive. Yeah. I listen to you every once in a while. So some key technologies real quick. We're not going to dive deep into these technologies. We are going to have a upcoming standalone session on our key technologies. But some of the technologies you will find and why they're important in our marine amplifier family is our regulated intelligent power supply found on the MHD models. If you're not familiar with RIPS, what it says essentially is as input voltage to the amplifier may lower, the output voltage is going to always be the same. So you always have the same performance, which is great, but it can pull a lot more current when that happens. So again, just make sure you have battery banks and an alternator that's capable of handling that potential extra current draw. A big one for me is different.
Is expensive.
Yes. A big.
You have an issue with your charging system, you call your friend to come to you.
Yeah, or you have a jumper pack in your car.
Yeah, on the boat is very, very different. You feed that beast and it'll give you great performance all day long. Just make sure you've done it correctly.
Yep. A big one for me is our differential balanced inputs. And the reason for that is they do an amazing job of helping mitigate any potential noise through the system. So, by isolating on the center pin of the RCA, we can kind of get rid of a lot of ground-based unwanted noise. But on the marine side of things, we also do a lot of extra filtering on our inputs as well, because we understand the potential for noise in a vessel is going to be different than in a car. So we got to deal with stuff like trim tabs and bilge pumps and other stuff that can create a lot of unwanted noise to the system. So we really work on our inputs to make sure as long as the amps are installed and grounded properly, you keep the audio on its own circuit power-wise, that will minimize the amount of potential noise that can enter through the audio system. Again, our NextD and NextD2 switching technologies make extremely efficient amplifiers. Essentially, it allows them to be more powerful, more smaller, and more friendly on the charging system. They're not going to be as current hungry as something like a regulated amp like the MHD may be. And then one of my other favorites is that advanced rollback protection. Amplifiers that utilize advanced rollback protection, when they start to hit their thermal limit, instead of just turning off, which nobody wants because there goes all your fun on the water, the amplifiers will slowly start to attenuate their output at a rate that you cannot hear. But because the output is less, it's pulling less power, it's not working as hard, that allows the amp to cool down. And what's cool with advanced rollback is, as the rollback's happening, once the amp cools down, it can go back to full tilt. Roll back, full tilt, roll back, full tilt. And especially in the marine environment where you got wind, noise, and all that stuff, it's something you're probably not going to hear, but the amp's going to stay on and not just shut off, which I think is very, very important. So let's do a quick run through on our amplifier family and which might be the right amp for your marine audio system. MVI is without a doubt our most flexible lineup of amplifiers to date. We have extremely powerful DSP processing built in, which allows you to take these multi-zone systems to the next level with the ability to create presets where you can maybe have one preset where it's cruise mode, everything's playing. One preset which kills the tower speaker, so your towers aren't playing when there's no one behind the boat. It's an extremely flexible lineup that allows you to customize the audio system to not just your musical or sound preferences, but applicational preferences as well, by turning zones on and off and all that cool stuff. These do use our new NextD2 switching technology, which first came out on the VXI side of amplifiers. So these are going to be our most efficient, charging system friendly amplifiers out there. And again, you got high voltage inputs with those differential balance inputs to help mitigate any potential noise that may come into the system. If you need a lot of power, that's where the MHD is going to come into play. And a lot of that's thanks to its regulated power supply, as we discussed about. Again, these are our loudest. They're phenomenal sounding amplifiers. Just make sure you have the ability to supply the potential current that these amplifiers may pull. They're a beast, but you got to feed the beast for it to play the way we want. Nice thing with MHD, you do have some 24 volt options available as well for your larger vessels that may be running on those 24 volt systems or RVs. I've actually seen, I think we even these have been used on like roller coaster rides. So there's a lot of flexibility with those 24 volt systems out there. I would say without a doubt, our most popular lineup is the M series. You have that flexibility like MVI, just without the DSP. And what I mean by flexibility, it's just a versatile line. There's literally an amplifier for just about any application. You have your 1-channel mono blocks, 2-channel, 3-channel, 4-channel, 5-channel, 6-channel, 8-channel. Whether it's a small system or this crazy extravagant 60 speaker system, there are amplifiers in the M series family for that. And what I love about the M and the MVI are those 6 and 8 channel options, because in these larger complex systems where we have a lot of speakers, we might not have room for 10 amplifiers, but we might have room for 4, 5, 8 channel or 6 channel amplifiers. So by taking advantage of that and that NXT switching technology, we can get a lot of inputs and outputs out of a relatively small chassis size for more complex multi-zone systems. Like MHD, you have 24 volt options available. And I think installers really like working with the M series amplifiers because all of the controls are on that top panel. So when you're trying to get down into, into the center console or down in a compartment where the amps are stored, it's really easy to have all of your controls and dials and switches on that top plate instead of trying to crank your head and get to the side of the amplifier to make any adjustments that may be needed for your crossovers or input sensitivity. And again, all of your connection points are on a single edge on the bottom to help prevent any moisture from running into the amplifier. So that's a really nice feature also on the M side of things. If you don't have a lot of room, these are perfect for those personal watercraft or really small vessels. The MX family of amplifiers. These little bricks are IP67, completely weatherproof if you put that watertight cover on the bottom. That's very key. Yes. I remember.
If not, it's like IP4 or something.
Yeah, I remember when MX first came out, a ticket came into tech support saying, I thought that these were weatherproof amps, blah, blah, blah. Look at all this corrosion on the switches and dials. And that waterproof cover was never put on the bottom of the amplifier. So it's not going to be waterproof if that cover doesn't go on. That protects the switches and your potentiometer. So make sure you do put that on. And with that on, you're going to have a sealed amp. This thing can be sprayed down, rain, salt, fog, mud, dirt, you name it. I actually saw a video we had posted on our Instagram a while ago of a guy in a UTV in Texas. And he had Vex pods, MX amplifiers, blasting music. It's loud. And he drives into a mud puddle. And all you see is pretty much his head and up. Shoulders down, everything was completely submerged in mud, including the UTV. And then as he pulls out, the music starts playing again, and he just kept on going. It didn't stop a beat despite being completely submerged, thanks to those MX amplifiers. So really nice small little amps. We do have a couple of options. You got a 300 watt monoblock, a 500 watt monoblock, and you got a small and large 4-channel, and that 3-channel option as well, which is great for those smaller systems where maybe you're running a pair of Vex pods or M3 or M6 6.5s and a small subwoofer system. So really, really cool line of amps for those tight, applications. And of course, don't forget the wires, please. Yes, you could use any wire, but our marine amp kits, we put some thought into them. One, we use ABYC compliant coloring, which means our ground wire is yellow. So it's in compliance with what the American Boat Yacht Council wants to see on ground wires for vessels. We use anti-corrosive plating on all of our materials, so you don't have to worry about corrosion or rust on the terminal connection points. But most importantly, the fuse holders and the circuit breakers are ignition protected. So, obviously with the fuse break, circuit or a circuit breaker or a fuse, if the current exceeds the limit, we want it to blow so we don't have too much heat running through that could cause problems. Now, the problem with that, though, on a vessel, a lot of times, these are going to be under the deck near the motor where there's fuel fumes. Well, we want the fuse to blow, but not the boat. So our fuse holders and circuit breakers are self-contained, so no potential sparks would be exposed to the environment, and keeps things safe when they do what they're supposed to do. So that's another important aspect of our marine amplifier kits. Again, our RCA cables, all anti-corrosive plating. They have that white look, so it maintains that marine feel throughout the vessel. And of course, we have our speaker wire as well. Again, all tinned oxygen-free copper to help avoid corrosion. But what's really cool on the speaker wire side of things is we have that new 6-conductor wire. This is a single strand that's got your positive, negative speaker wire, but it also has 4 extra wires for RGB lighting. If you've purchased an ETX V3 system, our tower speakers, over the last maybe 3 years or so, we've been actually running them from the factory with 6-conductor in there, knowing M6 was in the future. So if you have an M series ETX V3 that has that 6-conductor wiring already in it, it's an easy swap to M6 because the hole patterns are the same. Just put in a new pair of M6 speakers. All the wires for the RGB lighting are already there. Easy peasy, you're done. What's also nice about these 6-conductor wire is, you know, if you're running a larger vessel, a multi-zone system, and you've got M6 or M3 RGB speakers all throughout the boat, it's very difficult to run not just speaker wire, but then all of your RGB wire as well. So now we can handle all of that with a single run instead of having to run all sorts of extra wire through the boat, which could, you know, I'm a minimalist. I want as few things as possible that could fail on a vessel. And running one strand instead of a bunch of wires for me is a win in my book. So just keep those accessories in mind.
That one conduit holding the 6-conductor in there is great. The wire intended for the speaker connection, they're thicker than the other wires. So when you peel it back, you'll be able to identify the speaker wires very clearly because they're a larger gauge. So that's a nice clue to you. And then of course the other one is intended for the RGB. So you can, if you're going to use a color controller like Jonathan's getting real soon, so thanks for that. Or if you're going to run hardwire, you just pick the appropriate wires based on the normal standardized coloring. And just for the record, if you don't want to use our lighted controller, there's nothing proprietary about our RGB. It'll work with anything, and our controller will also work with other lighting as well. So just as a side note, that thing has got tons of current capacity, so it's a really awesome piece for hooking up a ton of lighting on a boat. So I'll stop now.
All right. So we covered a lot. Any further support you may need, get in touch with our technical support team. They are marine experts. As I said earlier, they are NEMA certified. They love doing marine system design. They understand the obstacles when it comes to troubleshooting marine audio systems. Every page on the JL Audio website has a help icon on the bottom. Click on help. That will open up a little field where you can type in what kind of help you need. It'll populate recommended articles from our help center or give you the option to reach tech support directly. Additionally, if you click support on the JL Audio website, that takes you to our help center. From there, you can click on submit request at the top, and that will take you to that same form that will get you in touch with tech support. The other nice thing with the help center is it is a treasure trove of information. It's not just about how to wire up a subwoofer and some warranty information, but there's a lot of good content, especially when you go to the marine audio section. This, designing by zone training that's coming up. We have articles explaining all of that. There was a joke earlier about how many subwoofers do you need on a boat. We have an article explaining why you want a lot of subs on the boat. So, if you're new to marine audio or car audio, or maybe you have someone new working for you, get them on our help center. Both the marine and the car audio support sections have a lot of information, the basics of grounds, how crossovers work, stuff that will fundamentally help you succeed when it comes to working with car and marine audio applications. Additionally, on top of those two options, you can email tech support, technical@jlaudio.com, or if you want to hear their deep, sultry, sexy voices, 954-443-1100, and follow the prompts to tech support.